This is the eLearn podcast. If you're passionate about the future of learning, you're in the right place. The expert guests on this show provide insights into the latest strategies, practices, and technologies for creating killer online learning outcomes. My name's Ladek, and I'm your host from OpenLMS. The eLearn podcast is sponsored by eLearn Magazine, your go-to resource for all things online learning. Click-by-click how-to articles, the latest in EdTech, a spotlight on successful outcomes and trends in the marketplace. Subscribe today and never miss a post at elearnmagazine.com. And OpenLMS, a company leveraging open source software to deliver a highly effective, customized, and engaging learning experience for schools, universities, companies, and governments around the world since 2005. Learn more at openlms.net. Hi there, I'm Ladek. This episode is part of a live real-time series that I recorded at the 2022 EDUCAUSE conference in Denver, Colorado. In this conversation, I speak with Noah Geisel about the impact he's seen with micro-credentialing, better supporting IT teams in higher ed, and much more at the University of Colorado at Boulder. And just a reminder, you can make sure to never miss an episode of the podcast by subscribing at elearnmagazine.com. Now, I give you Noah.
Noah is here. And is it Geisel?
That's awesome. That never happens. Yes.
Wow. I got a lucky strike. Maybe, whatever. So we're still here at EDUCAUSE. This is I saved the best for last.
I'm going to try and deliver though. Let's see. Hopefully people are nice.
You're the University of Colorado Boulder. You've been
sir.
Here forever. I see Micro-Credentials program manager.
Yeah. I've not been here forever. Yes, it was my 2-year anniversary.
A 2-year anniversary, yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah.
How do you like in Colorado? Where did you come from?
I'm actually a Colorado native. I'm the
Oh, see, you have been for forever.
And that's CU 2 years. I didn't know that I was going to be back in Colorado when I left. I moved to the Dominican Republic. I thought I'd be, somewhere in Asia or something. And I just had an amazing opportunity to come to Colorado and work on a movie with John Sayles, and I just never left.
That's fantastic. Well, a fellow Colorado native myself.
Hey-o.
So fantastic. But what I was going to say was that, when I first approached you about being on the podcast, I was going to talk about micro-credentials, but you're like, you know what? There's other cool things that we can talk about, like where IT sits in the RFP process, what are we doing about gamification and learning and these kinds of things. So let's talk about those things instead.
Yeah, not to for anybody who's watching this live or sees the recording, it wasn't about hijacking it. I just figured there's so many conversations that are kind of redundant at this point. And specific to this audience that you shared was a lot of IT professionals that let's share some things that they might not be heard about. And so
let's do it. So talk to me about the RFP process. It's something that we are a little bit passionate about in our company just because we bid on a lot of RFPs, right?
Yeah.
And so I actually kind of like a little light bulb went on. I'm like, wow, I'd love to hear from the other side of the table. Like, what are the challenges? Where do things kind of fall apart? What goes right? What have you seen and how would you do it better?
I mean, I'm sure there's lots of things to do better. I think that there's just so many opportunities, I think, for people to, at the very beginning, not to start out just by figuring out what are our functional requirements. I think that's a superpower that our IT colleagues have. And oftentimes they're brought into the party way too late for that. And so, as somebody who's been consulting in the micro-credentials and digital badging space for a lot of the last decade, I get so many phone calls, emails saying, what platform should we get? And I just know that your audience would hear that and just grit their teeth and say, that's like page 17 of volume 2 of questions that we should be asking. We should be asking, what do we want to do? What integrations are necessary? What accessibility needs do we have? What security needs do we have? What data do we want to be able to collect? Is it important that there's single sign-on? Is it important that it's talking to... And so I just think that by bringing in our IT professionals, and so I would encourage folks in the IT side of the house, if you put out feelers, find out if these are conversations are happening on their campus, because they probably are or soon will be. And so put the message out when that's happening, or if it's already happening, invite us to the table, because it's so often, I had a CIO tell me, we're really good at digging holes, and we will dig this hole where you tell us to, but if it's so often that we end up having to be told, fill that hole in. We actually needed it 5 feet over there. And that doesn't win hearts and minds in IT. Their resources are limited. It's just, it's not a good process. And it's just by just inviting those colleagues to the table early, they could say, actually, that's not where you need the hole. You need it over here. Let us help you. And so, and unfortunately, I think that does require advocacy, from OIT to put the word out. Use us. We're experts.
Why do you think that advocacy doesn't happen? Is it the nature of the beast? There's a lot of people in IT who are like, look, I have my expertise. I'm over here. And are there translators that should be in the middle? Or is that just essentially like a human resource issue on any campus where can you hire that translator? Or, I guess
that's such a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I think that why is that advocacy necessary? Just because people outside of IT are in IT, and so it just doesn't occur to them. We need IT
because IT is magic. Yes.
And so that I think it's not because of an intentional exclusion, is my guess. It's people not thinking, let's bring in these superheroes. Right? And so it shouldn't be necessary for them to advocate. I just think that if they do, hopefully there's an enthusiastic audience that, yeah, we need to bring you in. And I think that another reason to bring them in is not just that expertise, but because IT is also helping student success. Center for Teaching and Learning, housing, IT touches every other unit on campus. And so maybe they're also able to recognize other synchronicities or redundancies that can help make the process better, because they just have their fingerprints on so many things. It's just such a miss for me in my mind to not have them there.
Fantastic. So take me to, what would that look like if I were to sit up and have IT at the table? What would be like the 3 questions that you like? The one thing that you didn't say as you were kind of go through them was, do we already have this? I think that happens a lot, and you tell me if I'm wrong, where there's already a tool or a function that is what you need, and so you're actually like duplicating those kinds of things. Like, is there a top 10 list of questions that you'd put on the table in terms of what they would offer in part of this process?
And I will answer your question, and I just want to fully disclose I'm not an OIT
sure.
So I'm probably the worst person
As you do that, before you do that, I'm going to pause because I think my computer's going to shut off, and I'm going to solve that problem here, which is going to require one thing real quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Someone was not smart enough to engineer this particular thing. Let's see if this works. We'll find out.
Magic.
Did these just shut up now? Let's find out. Hey, Chris, can you still hear us? Interesting.
All is okay.
All is okay. Well, you know what? We're not going to.
Let's just battery. It's charged.
Just say, well, my computer was about to die. Sorry, folks, but here we are. So my question was, I know you're not. So I'm not.
I just said I am a total poser in answering this question. And since you asked it, I would say that that redundancy question is a great one, and they might be uniquely qualified to know the answer. I ran into a colleague from a school you've heard of this morning. She heard it from me. Hey, did you know that you all have contracts with multiple digital badge vendors? And I only know because I saw somebody who I knew on LinkedIn shared a badge they'd earned. It was issued by a vendor that's different from the one that I've seen represent about working with. So, yeah, I think the redundancy thing is a huge one. I think that asking, how are you going to support the training? So many people, jump into the purchasing without necessarily considering who's going to know how to do this? How are we going to build up capacity and then train the trainer on this? And so then all of a sudden, there's this, burden placed on OIT that they didn't offer or ask for. Mm-hmm. They may be totally thrilled to offer that, but they'd probably love to be asked first. And maybe by proactively, making that a part of the process, they help you realize we need to account for that internally as a resource. We need to build that into part of our cost of doing this.
Absolutely.
So those come to mind as two kind of high level questions.
Where does the total cost of ownership conversation come in? Is that a sort of a thing? Because you just put on training. Ultimately, any system you buy, you've got to maintain it. It's going to be upgraded over time. Like, what are the resources that you're going to put into it? Is that something that it almost sounds to me like an obvious one that's missed along the way for people who aren't in the IT universe?
Totally. Yeah, or don't have a great project manager to help them out, right? Like, left to my own devices, I would have missed out asking our users, hey, how are you planning on enrolling or, helping have learners declare for this? And then keeping track of them and progress monitoring, making sure they don't fall through cracks, especially if it's a non-academic unit that doesn't have an LMS, right? A lot of times they're only thinking about the cost of course design and instruction. And so IT, just because they see this over and over, are going to think of what was the word used? Total cost of ownership?
Yeah, total cost of ownership, yeah.
Love that phrase. Yeah, I feel like that's an OIT that where their phrase probably that they
I'm sure,
I can't believe this moron just learned that word. He was today years old. And
I'm sorry, no.
I think I probably know some things they don't know, but
Sure.
that we're the yin to each other's yang.
So take me to like your Micro-Credentials program manager. Talk to me about the learning space that you occupy. Another part of the conversation that you said, look, there's probably a lot of interesting conversations around where we're using gamification, where we're using non-traditional learning, where we're leveraging, Google searches rather than whatnot. Like, what are some of those things that are thoughts on your mind?
Yeah, I think to the gamification question in particular, and so this is maybe shifting from our IT audience more to like our LDX audience.
Wait, tell us what LDX is.
Sorry, learning design and experience, and so I hope that you know what? I am today years old when I realized I assumed I knew what it meant. I might be totally wrong, and somebody in the chat
you're totally
is
right, though. It's great. Hashtag LDX, we've got it.
Yeah. I've taught middle school before, so I have no dignity left to lose if I'm wrong about this. It is. I'm okay if people call me out. At Synergy on the Twitter if you need to subtweet me and just blast me. But I think a lot of people's background knowledge, where they come to this, they've heard this through gaming, and so they see badges and gaming makes total sense. They right away get it.
Yeah.
And there's a spot for that. That is recognition. I think that when we start to think about micro-credentials and the role for badges and micro-credentials, something that's unique that's not in the other space is credentials, right? So it's not just recognition; it's also something credentially.
Something that makes a difference in other parts of their life. It's actually valuable.
There's somebody other than just them and their teacher and their mom who cares. Right? There's an admissions counselor or a hiring manager who says, oh, they've been credentialed in something that I care about. Right? There's this, meaningfulness that's worthy of the school's brand. And so, I think anytime you put a finish line in front of people, there's going to inherently be gamification happening, right? Mm-hmm. And, with a short program, you are doing that. And so the gamification is inherent, just whether it's not overt is the question. If it is overt, that's totally okay. I think I would invite people to think about it intentionally. Because there's, I think, multiple risk factors. The biggest one is trivialization. I think that, if something just feels playful,
it's not important.
Joy and playful is important in learning, and it helps engagement. Great. And if a hiring manager perceives this as being whimsical and not credentialed, that's all of a sudden probably a risk factor to your entire ecosystem of micro-credentials, right? That it can erode the trust, I think. And so I would encourage people to be careful and intentional in how they go about it.
Awesome. What are some of the ways that the University of Colorado is putting micro-credentials on the table that you think maybe other universities aren't considering, or has been especially effective? Or
I think it's so early to it might be wagging the dog to talk about efficacy. There is certain things that we're excited about. We've made sure any unit on campus can propose. So it can be an academic unit or a non-academic unit. It can be for credit, non-credit. And clearly a non-academic unit cannot offer something for credit unless they're partnering with an academic unit. But as a result, we have things like a workforce workplace skills for student employees micro-credential.
Okay.
Somebody came to our office and said, look, we have these students who are spending more time in our call center working for us in a semester than they spend at any given class. And the only narrative they have to tell the story of their learning achievement for that is their paycheck.
Interesting. Yeah.
But they are acquiring and demonstrating skills.
100%. Yeah.
And there's nothing in the transcript of that. There's nothing in the narrative of who they are as a learner achiever that says, that is issued by CU Boulder that says that. And so, that we identified 3, top level skills of onboarding, training, communication, leadership, specific to that domain of student workers. And, as a way of signaling these students have demonstrated this, and they might be, top of the line for interviews after that for other jobs on campus, and for the first job when they leave campus.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
So just anecdotally, I think an amazing success out of the gate is, just from before we'd even issued any, just the students who were already in that office who had been told you will have an opportunity to earn this, had told their friends. When this fall, when we opened up jobs, somebody came to interview and they said, this is my top choice because I hear that I can get this Micro-Credential for this. And
That's
so all of a
super
sudden, this recruitment tool for students, you have a competitive advantage over every other unit until every other unit on campus starts adopting this.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a neat one. I think that there's stuff focused on faculty and teaching partners in teaching international students.
Mm-hmm.
There's a Micro-Credential just dedicated to understanding the international student experience and how you can be really valuable instructor in shaping their successful outcomes in your course. There's another one in just and equitable teaching practices. And, my kind of dream for where that goes is, we are very specific. There's criteria. You can't just show up to these,
of course,
put in seat time, and then you're earning a credential. There's measurable criteria that you have to demonstrate, and it's assessed in order to earn this. And, I think that we're going to start to see that the faculty who have these are going to have great outcomes for students, and they're going to be displaying their badges. And I think in a mid to near-term future, we might see learners who are previewing classes by looking at the professor and actually looking at their bios and seeing, oh, they have this badge. I had a class with somebody else who got credentialed in just and equitable teaching. I'm going to take it from them, not this person who doesn't have that, right? And my analogy for that is minimum wage. It didn't come about because of legislation. It came about because they sent out stickers to any employer that was offering it.
Really? I didn't know that.
And so consumers could say, I can buy my bread at this store that is paying a minimum wage, or this one doesn't have that.
Uh-huh.
And I don't want to put my money to support that brand, right? And so I think that we're going to start to see examples of that, social signaling through credentialing. So those are just 2 examples of things that I'm really excited about, and that there's lots I'm really excited about, but I think those are 2 examples of things that I'd love to see happening at other campuses, but I think we're kind of on the bleeding edge. I guess another thing is in the metadata. So if you use digital badges to, communicate the learning achievement that happened during Micro-Credential program. For us, we do differentiate. There are universities and colleges and employers that use those words interchangeably. The analogy that we use is that as a diploma is to a degree, a digital badge is to a micro.
Okay.
So digital badge is this vehicle that communicates somebody completed
that particular thing. Yeah.
Exactly. And, we really put on the table for the metadata that this is not just a sexy new digital version of what we used to go to the bookstore, buy fancy paper, and print out as a certificate. That we're taking advantage of the alignment feature to be able to actually say to somebody who's offering this, well, what are your membership organizations? Your members of the National Association, fill in the blank. Or when they graduate, what are your learners going to be members of? And do they have competency or standard training?
Right. Mm-hmm.
They do, really. So, is the learning that's happening here aligned, or that learning outcomes aligned with those standards? Because if so, we can actually, in a machine-readable way, point to those.
Right.
And say, anybody who's earned this credential, we're going to assert that there's a line between this credential and those standards. And I think in a not-too-distant future, employers are going to be doing reverse lookups on Indeed, on LinkedIn. They're going to say, we're looking in this position for people who have these skills that align with this standards framework, because we're members of this association. Right. And they're going to be able to pay Indeed money to send emails to learners who have credentials that have that alignment. And so I think you're giving your learners a competitive advantage when you take advantage of that. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that we're doing that I'm not seeing as many people do as I'd love it is actually attaching evidence. You have the ability
In the metadata, you're saying?
In the metadata,
okay.
for my badge could be totally identical to everybody else who's gotten the badge, except that my badge has my evidence that shows how I met that criteria.
Give me an example. What does that mean? Like, what would evidence be?
I mean, so that's just something that's totally accessible. Like, what if Red Cross, start doing digital badges for getting your CPR first aid?
Okay.
Part of that course, anywhere in the country, is you have to do 60 seconds of sustained chest compression. What if there's a video of me doing 60 seconds of sustained chest compression?
And so you can put that in there and say, hey, look, here's the video.
Anything that's digital, we just type with an email, a video, a Word doc, a PowerPoint, a testimonial from the instructor, audio, anything that's digital, we can include as a way of saying, you had to take our word for it. Like maybe
look at it, yeah.
They didn't bring in Kleenex for extra credit to get to that. This was what they had to meet. There was no B minuses. They either met the criteria or they have not yet met the criteria. And if you don't want to take our word for it, click on the evidence. We had this coding in R micro-credential. And if you earn that, your evidence links to your GitHub where your project that you built using R is there. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it is really cool. Super cool.
Yeah.
So what are as soon as the woman in the sky goes away here, I think we had to shut down.
Metaverse can still be part of this. They're not mutually exclusive.
That's Chris. Chris likes to put his opinion. So final question to you then. Maybe not the final, but so it's easy to talk about all the cool stuff and the vision for the future and what are the two top challenges that you are facing in your job or you're facing in your institution or working with others around either micro-credentialing or
And globally, I would say the two biggest challenges: senior level leaders buying it. That's the number one. There's so many projects I've had to work on where it was just pushing internally, just nonstop internal marketing. You should do this because it's good for kids, But if you have senior leaders who are bought in, even if they don't understand it at a deep level, if they're bought into the notion of it, they're talking about it. They're in a conversation, they hear somebody say something, they say, I wonder if that's a micro, you should go talk to somebody with a fancy downtown saying that's might be perceived as more than a suggestion.
Oh, yeah, sure.
They're coming, so I have the blessing of amazing senior level buy-in, so I'm not time for practical marketing because so many internal stakeholders are
following you.
And so senior leader buy-in is huge. And the other one is just a lack of recognition that for all the shining it's anything new, it's just change management.
Right.
And so are we just remembering the stuff we talked about in grad school or whatever on all these projects of just basic change management? Are we mapping out who are our stakeholders? Are we engaging our stakeholders? Are we, empathizing? Are we iterating? Are we just basic change, man? Are we doing a good job communicating? Do we have does comms know about this?
Right. Yeah. Sure. 100%.
Applies to any project, right? So change management, just basics, I think, are things that over and over I see people do. It's just such a predictable way to make decisions that don't stay made, right?
Fantastic. No, I will tell you what, I couldn't have asked for a better guest. To close out our live podcasting here at EduCause, this has been a fantastic conversation. Your energy is infectious.
Thanks.
I love what you're saying, and I love your vision. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Can I do one shameless plug before we cut that? Did they already cut it?
No. Please.
TheBadgeSummit.com. We just actually got our date secured to save the date, July 24 to 26. Dr. Michael Torrance from Motley State in Tennessee is going to be keynoting. He's just the most amazing human, and it is a conference just dedicated to digital badges and micro-credentials. So if you're exploring the space, all day, every day of this conference is just nerds like me geeking out on how we're going to change the world in equitable and accessible ways through micro-credentials.
And it's thebadgeconference.com?
TheBadgeSummit.com. Thank you for TheBadgeSummit.com, at TheBadgeSummit or at BadgeSummit on Twitter. It's on LinkedIn. Find us. We're a small but nimble team, which is me making excuse for the web page isn't updated yet with our save the date. So sorry if you're going to see 22 information, but 2023 info is coming soon with a save the date and call for proposals. Even if you're just getting started and your session is asking questions, not giving sexy answers, please propose. We'd love to see you there. Thank you.
There you go. There it is.
Thank you for letting me do that.
No worries, man. Thank you so much.
I hope this was helpful.
Absolutely.
Thanks again for joining me for the eLearn podcast. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. Just push subscribe on your player right now. And remember, you can join the conversation live on YouTube, Facebook, and my LinkedIn feed every week. I hope to see you there. Thanks.